In the autumn of 1894, renowned architect Cornelius Whitmore stood in the main parlor of his newly completed mansion on Beacon Hill, adjusting the brass fittings of his camera with meticulous care. The house, a masterpiece of Victorian Gothic Revival architecture, was completely empty. Freshly painted walls bore the scent of linseed oil. Polished hardwood floors gleamed under the afternoon sun, and not a single piece of furniture marred the pristine interior. Whitmore had commissioned this photograph to document his architectural achievement before the first residents moved in, intending to use the image for his professional portfolio and perhaps future marketing materials. What he captured instead would haunt the neighborhood for over a century. The photograph, taken on a crisp October morning when the light was at its most favorable angle, shows the elegant interior of the mansion's main floor in stunning detail. Sunlight streams through tall, arched windows, casting geometric shadows across the empty rooms and highlighting the intricate molding work that had taken craftsmen months to complete. The camera captured every architectural detail: the hand-carved newel post, the elaborate ceiling medallions, the imported Italian marble fireplace surround. But in one second-story window, clearly visible through the internal archway that connected the main parlor to the grand foyer, appears the unmistakable silhouette of a human face, pale, drawn, and staring directly at the camera with what appeared to be desperate intensity. This should have been impossible. Whitmore was alone in the house, and the building had been sealed and locked since construction finished 3 weeks earlier. The mystery began 6 months later when local journalist Edmund Hartwell first published the photograph in the Boston Evening Chronicle. Hartwell, known for his investigative pieces on municipal corruption and social reform, had been exploring unusual local stories when he encountered Whitmore at a charity reception hosted by the city's architectural society. The architect, clearly perplexed and somewhat disturbed by the strange image, had shown the photograph to several professional colleagues, none of them whom could explain the mysterious apparition. Some suggested photographic defects, others proposed optical illusions, but none could account for the clarity and human-like qualities of the face. Hartwell recognized the potential for a compelling human interest story and convinced Whitmore to let him publish the image with a detailed account of the circumstances surrounding its creation. The journalist conducted extensive interviews with Whitmore, construction workers who had built the mansion, and neighbors who might have witnessed unusual activity around the property during the final weeks of construction. The article created an immediate and widespread sensation throughout Boston's intellectual circles. Victorian society was deeply fascinated by spiritualism, seances, and unexplained phenomena, and the photograph seemed to offer tangible evidence of supernatural presence captured by the relatively new technology of photography. Readers wrote dozens of letters to the Chronicle sharing their own theories and similar experiences. Perhaps the house was built on cursed ground, disturbed by construction, or maybe the face belonged to a spirit from the nearby colonial cemetery whose eternal rest had been interrupted. Some suggested it was merely a photographic defect caused by double exposure or an optical illusion created by the complex interplay of light, shadow, and architectural elements. However, Dr. Margaret Thornfield, a historian specializing in 19th century photographic techniques and equipment, offered a dramatically different perspective when she examined the image several months later. Thornfield, who taught at Harvard University and had written extensively about early photography methods, explained that cameras in 1894 required exceptionally long exposure times, often between 3 and 5 minutes, for indoor photography. Depending on available light conditions and the sensitivity of the photographic plates being used. During such extended exposures, any movement whatsoever would create distinctive blur or ghosting effects that were immediately recognizable to experienced photographers. Yet, the face in the window appeared remarkably sharp and clear, with distinct facial features that suggested someone had remained perfectly motionless for the entire duration of the exposure. This level of stillness was nearly impossible to achieve accidentally, and certainly couldn't be maintained by someone who was unaware of being photographed. This technical detail introduced a deeply troubling contradiction that challenged every conventional explanation for the image. If someone had indeed been present in this supposedly empty house, they would have needed to maintain absolute stillness for at least 3 to 4 minutes while staring directly toward the camera positioned in the parlor below. This wasn't the behavior of an intruder caught off guard, someone accidentally trapped in the building, or a passerby glimpse through the window. It suggested deliberate, calculated positioning, as if the person desperately wanted to be photographed and understood exactly how the camera worked. Thornfield's detailed technical analysis caught the attention of Victoria Whitmore Blake, a distant cousin of the architect who had inherited a substantial collection of family documents after Cornelius Whitmore's death in 1923. Victoria, a retired librarian with a passion for genealogy and family history, possessed dozens of letters, diary entries, architectural sketches, and personal papers that had never been publicly examined or cataloged by professional historians. Among these papers was a disturbing family story that had been carefully preserved through whispered conversations at holiday gatherings, written notes passed between female relatives, and coded references in personal correspondence. The story had been deemed too scandalous for public discussion, but too important to let disappear entirely from family memory. According to Victoria's grandmother, who had heard the account directly from Cornelius Whitmore's housekeeper during the construction of the mansion, a young woman named Isabella Fairchild had mysteriously disappeared from the neighborhood under circumstances that local police found deeply suspicious but were unable to resolve. Isabella worked as a skilled seamstress and embroiderer, specializing in the elaborate decorative work demanded by Boston's wealthy families. She lived in a modest but respectable boarding house exactly 3 blocks from the construction site. Isabella had been seen by multiple witnesses walking past the partially built mansion on her way to work one morning in early September 1894, carrying her usual leather satchel containing threads, needles, and partially completed pieces. However, she never arrived at her destination, the home of a prominent banker's wife, who was expecting delivery of an expensive set of embroidered table linens. Despite extensive searches conducted by local police, volunteer groups from her church, and concerned members of the Seamstresses Guild, no trace of Isabella was ever found. The family story suggested something that had never been publicly acknowledged. Cornelius Whitmore had been romantically involved with Isabella Fairchild, though this relationship was kept strictly secret due to their vastly different social stations and the potential scandal it would create for Whitmore's architectural practice. When Isabella disappeared, Whitmore became increasingly reclusive, obsessed with completing his mansion quickly, and began displaying signs of what family members privately described as overwhelming guilt and grief. Some family members quietly suspected that Whitmore knew more about Isabella's disappearance than he admitted to authorities, but no concrete evidence ever supported these suspicions, and the family was reluctant to damage his professional reputation with unsubstantiated accusations. Victoria's investigation took a dramatic and unexpected turn when she discovered something that Edmund Hartwell had completely overlooked in his original research. Buried in the basement archives of the Chronicle's offices, stored in water-damaged boxes that hadn't been opened in decades, were Whitmore's original architectural plans and construction documents, donated by his estate years after his death. These plans included extraordinarily detailed floor layouts, elevation drawings, and construction specifications that had never been published or studied by architectural historians. When Victoria painstakingly compared these original plans to the actual construction of the mansion, which she could examine because it had been converted into a historical museum, she discovered significant and puzzling discrepancies. The plans clearly showed a small storage room behind the main staircase on the 2nd floor, complete with its own window, ventilation system, and separate entrance disguised as decorative wall paneling. However, this room simply didn't exist in the completed house. According to the architectural drawings, this space should have been easily accessible through a hidden door that blended seamlessly with the elaborate woodwork. Instead, that entire area appeared to have been sealed during construction, creating a completely enclosed hollow space within the mansion's walls. The implications of this discovery were deeply disturbing. If the original plans were accurate, there was a secret chamber inside the mansion that had been deliberately concealed during the final stages of the building process. This hidden chamber would be located directly behind the window where the mysterious face had appeared in Whitmore's photograph, the same window that shouldn't have been visible from inside the completed house. Victoria contacted Dr. Thornfield to share these shocking findings. Together, they developed a theory that explained both Isabella's disappearance and the haunting photograph. They theorized that Isabella Fairchild might have been trapped in this hidden chamber during the final stages of construction, possibly while meeting secretly with Whitmore in the unfinished house. If Isabella had been hiding in the planned storage room when construction workers arrived unexpectedly, and if those workers then sealed the wall without realizing anyone was inside, Isabella would have been entombed alive within the mansion's walls. This theory explained several previously puzzling aspects of the photograph. The face in the window would represent Isabella making a final, desperate attempt to signal for help after days of imprisonment. She would have seen Whitmore setting up his camera equipment in the parlor below and positioned herself at the small window, hoping to be noticed in the resulting photograph. The remarkable sharpness of her image resulted from her deliberate stillness. She understood that remaining motionless was crucial to ensure she would be clearly visible in the final image. Dr. Thornfield reached out to Detective Chief Inspector Harold Pembroke, a specialist in cold cases involving historical mysteries and unexplained disappearances. Pembroke had developed innovative investigative techniques that combined modern forensic technology with meticulous historical research and had successfully solved several decades-old cases that had baffled previous investigators. Pembroke agreed to examine the mansion, assembling a team that included structural engineers, ground-penetrating radar specialists, and forensic archaeologists. Using Victoria's original floor plans as their guide, they conducted a thorough and systematic scan of the mansion's interior walls, paying particular attention to the area behind the main staircase. The radar equipment immediately detected the hollow space exactly where the plans indicated the storage room should be located. Museum administrators, fascinated by the historical implications, granted permission for a careful archaeological excavation. Workers painstakingly removed sections of the ornate wall paneling, revealing a bricked-up doorway that had been painted over multiple times during the mansion's century-long history. Behind the bricks, they discovered a small room approximately 8 feet square, with one window facing the main parlor where Whitmore had positioned his camera. Inside this chamber, the team made a heartbreaking discovery that confirmed their worst fears. Human remains lay near the window, along with personal effects that included a brass locket containing a photograph, several coins dated 1894, a small leather-bound prayer book, and fragments of a dark blue dress with intricate embroidered details, consistent with both the clothing Isabella Fairchild was wearing when she disappeared and her profession as a skilled seamstress. Most tragically, deep scratches on the interior walls showed where Isabella had desperately tried to claw her way out of her prison, and marks near the window suggested she had attempted to break the glass to attract attention or escape. A medical examination of the remains confirmed that Isabella had survived for several days after being trapped, probably sustained by rainwater that seeped through the window frame, and perhaps small amounts of food she might have been carrying. Her positioning near the window suggested she had spent her final hours watching the parlor below, hoping someone would notice her plight and come to her rescue. The investigation revealed that Isabella's entrapment was accidental, but entirely preventable. Construction records showed that workers had received last-minute instructions to seal the storage room because Whitmore had decided the space was unnecessary and wanted to simplify the interior design. However, Whitmore apparently forgot to inform his construction crew that Isabella sometimes used this space as a private meeting place where they could conduct their secret relationship away from prying eyes. When the workers arrived early one morning and found the room's door closed, They assumed the space was empty and proceeded with their orders to brick up the entrance and continue with the wall finishing work. Further investigation into the construction timeline revealed troubling details about the days surrounding Isabella's disappearance. Work records showed that the wall sealing occurred on September 15th, exactly 3 days after Isabella was last seen. During those 3 days, Whitmore had been notably absent from the construction site, claiming he was meeting with potential clients in New York City. However, hotel records later discovered by Pembroke's team showed no evidence of Whitmore's presence in New York during that period. The investigation also uncovered correspondence between Whitmore and Isabella that had been preserved in a safety deposit box at a local bank. These letters, written in the months before her death, revealed the depth of their relationship and Isabella's growing concern about maintaining their secrecy. In her final letter, dated just 1 week before her disappearance, Isabella expressed fear that their relationship was becoming too dangerous and suggested they should meet less frequently. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery of Whitmore's personal diary, found among Victoria's inherited documents. Or entries from late September 1894 showed his increasing agitation and guilt, with cryptic references to terrible mistakes and sounds in the walls that kept him awake at night. These entries suggested that Whitmore suspected what had happened to Isabella, but was too paralyzed by guilt and fear to investigate properly. The diary also revealed that Whitmore had originally planned to install speaking tubes between rooms in the mansion, a common feature in Victorian homes that would have allowed communication between floors. However, he abruptly canceled this feature just days before Isabella's disappearance, possibly because he feared what he might hear through such a system. The mystery of the face in the window was finally solved after more than a century, but the resolution brought no satisfaction to anyone involved in the investigation. What had seemed like a supernatural phenomenon was actually a final, desperate plea for help that went unnoticed until modern technology and persistent historical research revealed the truth. Isabella Fairchild had died alone and forgotten. Her disappearance dismissed as another case of a young woman leaving town for better opportunities elsewhere. The museum now displays Isabella's photograph prominently, along with her personal effects and the complete story of her tragic death, ensuring that her memory will be preserved and honored for future generations. A memorial service was held for Isabella more than a century after her death, attended by descendants of both families and members of the Historical Society who had worked to uncover her story.